Good evening, members, and good evening, members of the public. My name is Councillor David Beeman, and I'm the chairman of this committee. I'm accompanied tonight by my vice chair, Councillor Penny Rivers. Members and officers, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak, and please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. And please, can I also ask any questions to get brief and to the point? I'd like to remind ward councillors to step separately from the committee while applications in their ward are being considered and voted on by the committee. I think there's only one case. Right, here we go. Right, let's start with the housekeeping. First of all, apologies for absence of substitutions. I think there's only Phoebe Sullivan not present at the moment, and she told me she's going to be a bit late.
Yep, that's correct, Chair. We've not received any apologies.
Minutes of the last meeting. Committee, are you happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February 2024 and published on the council's website as a correct record of the meeting? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? I'll suspect Mr. Morrison is going to use the usual one, yes?
The Surrey Wildlife Trust, thank you.
Any other declarations of interest? Questions by members of the public? Leila?
We've not received any, Chair.
From members, Leila?
No questions from members.
You, Claire?
No, Chair.
Oh, yes, Councillor.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I just wonder if I could ask the head of planning a question related to changes to the legislation. It's just something that's intrigued me from this afternoon. An officer very kindly sent me a response explaining what they were doing, and which was very, very kind. But mentioned, and this was for residential in Farnham, just a small one, 6 properties, but he mentioned that the tilted balance was in play. And I just wondered, with the changes to the MPPF and the wording in paragraph 14, what the status is of the neighbourhood plan when it comes to that, because it's not been raised in the officer's report. It doesn't make any difference to the decision, but it's just something that's been worrying me. They don't mention the changes, they mention the tilted balance, and I just want to know, because we allocate all the sites in Farnham, what the status of paragraph 14 is and what the status of the neighbourhood plan therefore is. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a matter that we have done a couple of briefings on, so I'm quite happy to circulate the note that's been produced in terms of paragraph 14 and the status of neighbourhood plans with the changes to the MPPF that came into effect just before Christmas. So if I circulate a note, and then if there are specific cases, then please come back to me and have a discussion with me following the circulation of that note.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just come back briefly, because of course it is relevant to things we're looking at tonight, the weight of the neighbourhood plan in Farnham for the applications in Farnham. So it is important that we do understand the changes to the MPPF and if that has restored the neighbourhood plan to full weight within the development plan. Yes,
it is important, and if there is it's relevant within any matter this evening, then obviously that will be in the report and it can be discussed in the context of the application.
Can we move on? Right, before we start, I'd like to advise the committee that item WA 2023-02273, the Bowen Hall, Vicarage Hill, Farnham, GU98HG, has been withdrawn by the applicants, so we will not be considering that particular application at this meeting. Right, let's move on to our first item, which is a fairly sensitive issue, but it's WA 2023-00087, land at Farnham Park, Cemetery, Hale Road, Farnham. The proposed erection of a funeral ceremony building with associated landscape and parking, and the report is presented by Russell Brown. Russell.
Good evening, everyone. As the chair has just outlined the application, so this is an application for a site on the north-east of Farnham, situated between Lower Hale and Upper Hale to the west of Badshot Lee. The site itself is primarily comprised of open green space adjoining Farnham Park, which is a historic park, and garden grade listed 2 on the west side and the A325 to the east. There is some residential development to the north of the site and further open space to the south, some of which is within the applicant's ownership. The grade 2 listed St John's the Evangelist Church is located to the north of a proposed entrance to the site, and the Danielle Sicilian restaurant shares the proposed site access along with 2 residential properties and a car dealer. The site is within the countryside beyond the green belt, an area of strategic visual importance as well as an area of great landscape value. The background to this site is that separate planning permissions were granted previously for the use of it as a cemetery and woodland burials, as well as for suitable alternative natural green space known as sang. The critical difference between those two permissions being that the cemetery and the woodland burial use has been implemented by way of the laying of a gravel trap, buffer zone and landscaping, but the sang has not been implemented. It is noted that over 10 hectares of this land, including this particular site, was identified as potential sang in the Farnham neighbourhood plan, but that permission is no longer extant and does not preclude the land from being used for another use. So to be clear, this application is not for the loss of sang, it is for the erection of a single-storey pavilion building to prepare and host funeral ceremonies. Also proposed in this application are alterations to the existing car park, landscape including a new approach path and a new substation within the car park. So it is proposed that there would be approximately 3 funerals a week, held on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays between 10 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon, with typically 40 attendees, but there's a potential for up to 181 in rare circumstances. The need for the application is that the applicant does not have access to an appropriate building that allows for funeral preparation and ceremonies to be carried out at the burial ground, which is the reason for the proposal. Their current cemetery allocation in Woking is nearing full capacity. So I was just going to show you some photos of the site. This is the access just off Hale Road. You can kind of see the...
It's coming up on the screen.
Oh.
We haven't got the presentation on the screen. Sorry, members. Sorry, members, you need the presentation on the screen, I'm assuming? Okay. So. Members, we'll start the presentation again so you actually see the presentation. Whilst we're just getting that set up, I just wanted to confirm, Councillor, that we did send an email to all councillors on the changes to the MPPF as a note. And in that note, it says at para 6, protection for neighbourhood plans, paragraph 14 has been amended to apply to neighbourhood plans made within the past 5 as opposed to 2 years. So it's changing the time for the neighbourhood plans. This means that where the presumption of sustainable development bracket tilt balance applies and development would conflict with the neighbourhood plan, that is less than 5 years old, the allocation at least and allocates at least one housing site, the adverse impact for granting planning permission is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The government intends this change to give more neighbourhood plan protection for from speculative development when a council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. So that note has been circulated to all members, and it's our intention that there will be a training session for all members on the 2nd of April, which will be for enforcement and actually will pick up on the changes to the MPPF.
Can I just briefly explain why I asked the question? It was because of the report that went out today, which didn't seem to include that. And that was the point I was confused.
Yeah, I totally, and maybe we can pick that up separately because the report isn't on this agenda. So can we go back now to the presentation? I think we're going to have to rerun, the presentation with the slides up. Sorry.
Here we go again.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I didn't get very far into the presentation at all. It was just explaining the kind of background to the application, the site history. But this is a location of the site. The blue line there shows the applicant's ownership, and the red line shows the actual part of the site to which this application relates. And again, just a more detailed site location plan there. So this is the existing site plan, just really showing the existing landscaping on site. And there's also a container building as well on the site, and the existing car parking area as well. And then this is a photo of the entrance to the site just off Hale Road. And this is kind of just inside the access at the edge of the car park, looking north towards St John the Evangelist Church. Again, another photo from the site that's looking towards it, kind of from within the graveyard of the church. And then you've got some photos here of the site, which is from various viewpoints, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. So this would kind of be from the proposed access road looking into the site. Again, from just outside the site, or just inside the site, sorry, looking at the hedgerow on the site at the moment, the pylons in the background, which are actually outside the red line. This one is just outside the site, demarcated by the boundary fence. And then that's a photo again within the site, looking back at the church building. Actually, we'll go back up to that one because that's almost where the proposed building's going to be in terms of the views you're going to have towards the church. And then what I was talking about the site history in terms of what has previously been approved into the use of the site as a burial grounds. So you can see on those maps there, you've got Zone 1 and Zone 2. Zone 1 and Zone 2 were approved as the burial grounds. This application relates solely to Zone 1, where you can see the proposed building there, and the plan to the left is just really showing some of the extent of the landscaping works that were previously granted permission in 2010. And now the proposed site plan shows location of the building within the red line boundary, as well as covering the access and car parking, which I'll show you in a minute. So these are the changes to car parking. So you've got I think 75 spaces there, some of which are going to be given over to St John's Church as part of this application. They're the ones in the blue. And then the rest are going to be shared between the proposed funeral building and it's shown as a Hotel Danielle, but it's the hotel use is now ceased. It's a restaurant. Okay. And then just moving on to the actually proposed floor plan for building, I'm just going to kind of discuss the layout and how it would work practically on the day of a funeral. So mourners would arrive underneath the covered entrance. They would then go left and remove their coats and shoes in the open cloakroom, which is adjacent to a reception area served by a kitchenette for the preparation of post-ceremony refreshments. And there's also toilets there, which are both lit by a large window that looks towards the burial area. This space can also function as overspill space on the rare occasions that the hall capacity of 150 people is exceeded. The main hall sits at the centre of the plan and can accommodate, as I said, accommodate 150 attendees, laid out in the direction of a Qibla, which is a direction towards a Kaaba in the sacred mosque in Mecca. So preparation of the deceased takes place in the back of a house accommodation to the right side of the main hall and is a religious practice that involves washing the body with soap and water in a specific way by volunteers of the same gender from the Ismaili community. No chemicals are used other than disinfectant following this preparation. The body would usually arrive from the undertakers very early in the morning ahead of a funeral on the day or the night before, and just to make it clear, the building is not to be used as a mortuary. So once prepared, the deceased are brought through to the adjacent family room and taken through to the main hall when the main funeral ceremony begins. Adjacent to the family room are a kitchen, showering and changing facilities, but for use of the volunteers who would carry out the preparation of the body. Funerals are usually held as soon as practically possible after the demise of an individual, which is usually within a week. Occasionally, if the deceased passed away at home or unexpectedly, a post-mortem is held by the local health coroner in the area in which the deceased lived, and this may take a little longer. The deceased is only buried once the burial certificate is received. So hopefully that was a useful kind of background to the kind of the building itself and the ceremony as well. So these are the sections. The view is looking east at the western elevation of the proposed building and shows that the land levels drop from north to south on the site. The building has been purposely located at the lowest part of the main site. And then just moving on to the elevations, the proposed building would have two low flat roofed elements either side of a pitched thatched roof covering the main hall and extending over the entrance area as you saw on the floor plan. A pair of timber columns forming the supporting structure to the roof, which then diverge at eaves level to intersect at the roof ridge, also form part of the building. There are also two pitched dormers on either side roof slope, which I'll just show here. Glazing is proposed on the gable ends of the main hall above eaves level. Below the eaves, the southern elevation is formed of, just go back up to the southern elevation, it's formed of thick timber line fences. The whole pavilion is slightly dug into the ground, sitting beneath a canopy line of the existing surrounding trees, which helps the building to be well concealed from all neighbouring vantage points. In terms of the materials, you've got a water reed thatched roof, timber boarding for the external walls, masonry plinths underneath, a felt membrane to the parapet and woven hazel wattle in between timber framing elements to the side walls. to the main hall. Just going to move on to a few visuals. So this is looking at the south elevation of the building. From kind of the soft landscaping, the path is immediately in front of the building and runs either side, which would be kind of a bound gravel or hogging type path, details of which can be secured by a condition. Just moving on to another visual, just showing you that pathway, which is just for pedestrians and emergency vehicle access. Just a brief summary of the consultation responses we've had from this application. I think the main point to note now is that Surrey County Highways have objected on the basis that one of their suggested conditions about the provision of a footpath has not been included within the conditions on my report. So the condition reads, the development hereby approved shall not be first opened unless and until a footpath has been provided through the site in accordance with details to be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. This footpath shall be a minimum of 2.5 metres in width and shall thereafter be permanently retained and maintained for its designated purpose. It is understood that, I'll pull up the plans, so it might be a bit more useful. This is not orientated north, but effectively in the left of your screens is a southern boundary. It is understood that the suggested footpath would be run along that boundary of the site to link Hale Road in with Hale Trail Greenway, which runs along the eastern edge of Farnham Park and joins the footpath from Scholars Way to the south to East House Lane to the north. The opinion of officers is that this condition hasn't been specifically justified and ultimately is not necessary to make the development acceptable. It also doesn't meet all of the tests in the National Planning Policy Framework. So that's the reason really why it wasn't added to the recommendation for approval. I'll just point out that highways have no objection to the development in other means, and had no objection to the previous application in 2010 for the use of the site on highway safety, capacity and policy grounds. And it is important to note that the chip generation associated with the previous permission is a material consideration, given that this application is effectively just for construction of a new building and additional car parking spaces within an existing car parking area. I would just highlight about the trip generation that has been based on the typical number of weekly funerals it's mainly existing burial ground, as well as how and when the funerals typically take place, which usually lasts about anywhere between 60 and 90 minutes. Yeah, that was really the end of my presentation, really. Leave one of these visuals up.
Thank you, Russell. Right, we have a number of public speakers on this item. And the first public speaker is Catherine Powell. Catherine, you here? Yes, sir. Catherine, you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking to you on behalf of the hundreds of local residents who have objected to this application. This site was approved for Sang in 2020 and included in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, which is less than 5 years old, so has full weight. There are lots of bits of the planning history sadly completely missing from the case officer's report, including 2 key withdrawn applications which have many similar features to those in this application. WA 2014-0209 erection of a reception building and parking, noting that not all the land that makes up the site you are looking at today has permission for use as a cemetery. WA 2013-2105 to vary conditions to the 2010 permission to allow the erection of gravestones and monuments. Both withdrawn as the case officer was minded to refuse. The statement from the application on the planning portal reads, officers remain concerned regarding the proposals and their impact on the character, appearance of the countryside and the AGLV. The recommendation remains that permission will be refused. There are massive differences between what was approved in 2010 and what is proposed now, but significant similarities with the proposals that were withdrawn because they were going to be refused. In 2010, one low-impact woodland burial with no mechanical handling on site, which would maintain the open nature of the countryside in this area, the views of the Grade 2 listed park, and potential for concurrent use with the neighbouring restaurant and 180-year-old St John's Church. Now, the permission that was granted in 2010 is in the ownership of at least 2 organisations. There is potential concurrent use of St John's Church, the restaurant, a burial ground now being operated by Iman Gardens, and this site, which does contain a mortuary, which is defined as a storage room for dead bodies prior to burial and includes a cold store, a new 180 capacity building, much larger than the one withdrawn in 2014, and a second burial area. All users of this site will be from London based on the travel plan and will come by motor vehicle, a round trip of 80 miles per vehicle. So just the funerals will result in more than 800 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year. These journeys will also add to the existing air quality issues at the nearby traffic lights, highlighted in the Waverley Air Quality Status Report issued in 2012, specifically highlighting issues in this area. Worst of all, there will be no access through this site. Absolutely zero local benefit. Local councillors worked hard with residents and groups, including the Farnham Cycling Campaign, to identify a workable potential off-road walking and cycling route at the site that would help Farnham to contribute to Waverley's commitment to become carbon neutral by 2030 and to provide safe and healthy travel for our children to the schools on Webburn Road. Highways have indicated they would only support this application with this access included to mitigate the cumulative impact on our roads. The case officer has recommended approval with no condition to that effect. If the application is approved, it will be in direct conflict with the highway assessment of cumulative impact of traffic on the road that has been congested for at least the last 10 years. Please refuse this application. If you don't, where will this stop? Burials are one thing, a mortuary for body storage, a large funeral building, and all of the associated traffic problems are something completely different. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Oh, I realise it's a very emotive subject, but anyway, next speaker is Robert Steele. Robert, you too have 4 minutes when you start speaking.
Thank you, councillors. My name's Robert Steele of Savills, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant, the Ismaili Trust. I start by providing you with a few clarifications. Firstly, the site purchased in 2020 has extant planning permission for burials 6 days a week, and the Trust can use the site for this purpose now. Secondly, the proposed building is not for a mortuary. Bodies will be brought by hearse from the undertaker in the morning of the burial and will be prepared using soap and water. There will be no invasive procedures carried out on the bodies and no generation of medical waste. Thirdly, Surrey County Council Highways Authority informed the scope of the assessments and has reviewed all the highway information submitted and confirm there will be no adverse impact on highway safety or capacity. In respect of their position on the footpath connection, the planning officers consider that such a requirement is not necessary to make this application acceptable in planning terms in accordance with planning legislation. As such, it is not being included in their recommendation. Having said that, the applicant was otherwise willing to transfer a strip of land from its ownership to Surrey County Council for it to deliver a footpath between Howe Road and Farnham Park. However, the Ismaili Trust is a charity and has a vision for creating a special place for families and friends to lay rest their loved ones. To achieve this, the Trust engaged a 2022 Sterling Prize-winning architect, as well as expert landscape architects and consultants to design a high-quality building for funeral services. The building has been designed with a comprehensive understanding of the context, setting, and a purpose to create a place of contemplation and peace. The building will have simple agricultural form, including a thatched roof and external walls cladded in timber. The building will not be used for any other religious services or functions. In addition, over 500 metres of hedgerow and woodland planting consisting over 300 trees is proposed, reflecting the area of great landscape value within which the site is located and preserving the settlement gap. The Trust wishes to assure the councillors, as well as the Farnham community, that the Ismaili community is a peaceful one with a pluralistic outlook. The Trust's current burial ground at Brookwood, which it shares with other faith groups, is near capacity, and so the Trust intends to start burials at the site shortly. The community hold on average 2 burials a week, which are held on either Tuesdays, Thursdays or Saturdays, and take place in the morning to early afternoon. As such, the building would not be used for services every day. As is the current practice, the Trust will work with mourners to promote car sharing and minibuses, and this is despite no such planning controls applying to the site's existing use. To conclude, the purpose of this application is to create a special place for families and friends to say goodbye through a short service and to lay rest their loved ones, having a positive impact on the environment and being respectful to its neighbours. The application was submitted in January 2023, and the applicant has responded to all consultee comments in a positive way, providing further information to help officers come to their recommendation. Therefore, we hope the application is approved this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Robert. Right, the next public speaker is Councillor Alan Earwaker from Farnham Town Council. Alan, will you have 4 minutes when you start speaking?
Start the clock again. Okay. I'm here this evening representing Farnham Town Council's objection. This site has a long planning history of development and the site being refused. It was rejected as a proposed site for development in both the 2017 and 2020 Farnham neighbourhood plans. A landscape character assessment was conducted for the revised Farnham neighbourhood plan. This character area lies within the AGLV, an area of high landscape value and sensitivity, described as a peaceful and attractive rural landscape. Parts of the area contribute towards the setting to listed buildings, in particular the Church of St John the Evangelist. There are historic links in ownership between the character area and Farnham Park, and the area forms the eastern rural setting to the park, linking it to its historic rural settings. As an alternative to development, the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, dated 3rd of April 2020, identifies this site land east of Farnham Park as a suitable area of natural green space and a natural extension of Farnham Park, a huge benefit to local people for recreation and connectivity, extending safe routes for walking and cycling. Over 10 hectares of this site have permission to be used as a suitable area of natural green space, SANG. As you will know, SANG land is required for all new development in Farnham in accordance with the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area Avoidance Strategy. Without available SANG, we cannot develop our brownfield sites. We will be far from meeting Waverley's 5-year housing land supply, despite further protection being given to Labour plans in the recently updated MPPF, and more of our greenfields will be at risk from speculative developers offering bespoke on-site SANG. This application closes off the site to local people with little benefit to the community of Farnham and proposes an intensification of the use of the site, enclosing areas with a continuous deer fence. In 2010, permission was granted for 6 hectares to be used as a cemetery and woodland burial site, the cemetery element being approximately 1.1 hectares located to the west of the church. The remainder of this site, 4.9 hectares, with the exception of a parking area, given over to the woodland burial ground, with no memorials or any other features above ground, excluding all built form and allowing public access to the open space. Conditions were included to limit tree planting as vistas will be maintained open and a seasonal wet ditch to be enhanced as a wildlife corridor. This application allowed access for local people and wildlife. The proposals in this application include restricting views through the site with earth banks with trees atop and dense tree planting to screen a 9-metre high funeral ceremony building. The scale and size of the proposed building and its use as a mortuary is totally inappropriate on this site, with restrictions of no structures above ground. The proposed building area has capacity for large gatherings, generating significant traffic in an already highly congested area. This application is not compliant with the Farnham Design Statement, which has guidance to ensure that new development should reflect the surroundings, should be appropriate for the site in which it sits, and the traffic implications should be carefully considered. This application is not compliant with Farnham Neighbourhood Plan policies FNP1, FNP10, FNP11, FNP12, FNP13 and policy FNP30. To reiterate, Farnham Town Council strongly objects to the intensification of the use of this site, previously designated as a woodland burial site, and Farnham strongly objects to the scale and size of this building.
Thank you very much, Alan. Right. The final public speaker is the local ward councillor, which is Councillor Tony Fairclough. Tony, you have 4 minutes, well, you have 8 minutes in total, right, for 4 minutes before now and 4 minutes after the debate ends. Councillor Fairclough, your turn.
Thank you, Chair. Based on what you've heard and read, I would like you to consider 5 key questions. First, what is currently permitted and what is being requested? There is current permission for woodland burials on some of the land, yet the marketing materials tell us that there will be monuments 1 metre high, so not woodland burials at all. In 2010, there were 5 considerations specifically stated in the reasons for approval. 5 considerations under which permission was granted, which are now being ignored. It was said that the burial site would provide a local resource, reducing the need for local people to travel. Yet in the application itself, it states that attendees will actually be coming from London. The burial site would protect the countryside with no operational development within it. Yet what is being requested is the construction of a large 180-person capacity building. The building site would have a low-intensity use and would generate low traffic levels. Yet the current proposal is for burials 3 days a week from, as you've heard, early in the morning to 6 p.m, with up to 180 people attending. The burial site would have no on-site mechanical transport, yet what is being requested is the use of mechanical diggers and golf buggies. The burial site landscape would be of natural appearance and irregular layouts, yet what is being requested is a formal circle and dense planting obscuring Farnham Park. What is currently permitted is certainly not what is being requested. On to question 2. Is what has been requested really what is being proposed? The application form says change of use to F2B, halls of meeting places for the principal use of the local community. Yet in the application it states that community using the facility lives in London. The proposed 180-person capacity building will have no local community use. And question 3, might there be other benefits to the local community? Sadly not. The landowner has in fact refused to provide local residents with the walking and cycling route that is desperately needed to form part of a functional off-road system that will support active and sustainable travel in the local area. Question 4, is there a danger of further permission creep? Unfortunately, it is already occurring. We already have 2 burial sites where one was permitted on the consented lands. In addition, the applicant is currently proposing to use a portion of the woodland burial area. Not only is the remainder in reserve for future burials, they also hold a large area of land with no current consent where they may seek future permission for burials. And so we move to the final question 5. Is the proposal consistent with Waverley's own policies and commitments? For example, does the proposal reflect Waverley's environmental health policies? Does the proposal reflect Waverley's climate change commitments? An application designed to see hundreds of additional car journeys to and from London on at least 3 days a week, every week, suggests not. And what the application most certainly doesn't reflect is the Waverley Local Plan, or the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, policies FNP 1, 10, 11, 12 and 13 and 30, nor does it reflect the Farnham Design Statement. Previous case officers have taken views that have resulted in 2 withdrawn applications. Please follow their lead and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Fairclough. You've got 4 minutes after the debate, should you so wish. Right. First of all, are there any questions that any member wants to ask the officer? Any technical questions? Yes, Councillor Rini.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the officer to go back to the slide showing consultation, please? If it's not easy, I can ask the question anyway if we can't get back to it. It's the one that actually shows the Farnham objections. My question's twofold to the officer. Firstly, I'm getting very confused with the term mortuary. I heard the officer say this would never be used as a mortuary, and yet several times we've heard quoted and the objection that it would be used as a mortuary. So perhaps we could clear that up. My second question is on the same slide about parking. The officer said there'd be plenty of parking, yet Farnham have objected on grounds of parking. So I would like to clear up this confusion. First of all, is there a definition of a mortuary? Will this be used or not? And secondly, is there adequate, in the officer's view, parking on site, or indeed would they have to park off site, which I assume is what Farnham are basing their objection on?
That's all.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. So just about the first question about the mortuary, I'll go up to the planner because it's clear from the plan that is in front of us there is no mortuary provided on site. I think I hopefully covered that question earlier during my presentation that there is no mortuary on site. So the undertaker brings bodies to the site, and it is just kind of preparation with soap and water. There's no kind of invasive kind of trying to think of a word. No invasive kind of process involved. And then just find the plan quickly. Yeah, so hopefully the floor plan's up there. There's no mortuary on the floor plan that's in front of us. You've got the preparation space, which is for the activities that I previously outlined. And then just about the car parking, highways don't actually object on the basis of car parking. As I stated, there are 75 spaces on site, which is capable of accommodating all the proposed activities in terms of the number of people that will be arriving for funerals. As earlier stated, there would be car sharing and a travel plan secured by condition to ensure that there would be less trips. It's not a case of all of the attendees kind of travelling separately. There's also enough spaces for the restaurant on site as well. So I think what was previously consented was 6 spaces for the restaurant and 19 related to the cemetery. So if you total them up, it's 25 spaces, and the site has kind of quite a lot of capacity to provide more car parking spaces, none of which are kind of formally marked out. But you know, I think that to formally mark them out would have a more kind of formalised impact on the landscape character. So you can kind of see on the plan there is quite a lot of spaces, and it's not anticipated that there will be any need to park off the site.
Member want to ask a technical question? Yeah, Councillor Austin and Councillor White.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the use classes order. And can you just clarify exactly what use we're going for here? Class F2B, a hall or meeting place for the principal use of the local community. Is that right?
So I appreciate what you're saying there. I mean, there was no use class actually in the description. You will note the use has actually already been established through the 2010 permission for the burial. So it doesn't really fall within use class F2. I mean, my view on it would be that it would fall within the sui generis, which is not sui generis, which is kind of is a use class, but it covers a lot of different uses that are slightly different from these ones that are listed in the use classes order.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, you said before it was given a sang use, but that use expired. How can that expire? Is there a time limit on a change of use to sang? I mean, surely it's like just designated as sang. Could you just clarify? Thank you.
I think Claire was,
So it's a planning permission that wasn't implemented. So as members will be aware, we can grant planning permissions, but we can't make people implement them. And this was a planning permission that wasn't implemented.
Councillor White, technical question? Over.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I believe this question would go to Head of Planning. Claire, maybe you could just clarify. I've not seen this recommendation paragraph before. Could you just if you like, illustrate or explain the detail of it, what it means?
So yeah, on the recommendation. The recommendation's actually been amended, so it's just recommended that planning permission is granted subject to conditions rather than the delegated, which is normally the recommendation where you're seeking delegated authority to complete a legal agreement. So the update sheet has just amended that recommendation.
Thank you. Could I then ask you further, why, as members, are we considering this application when highways have effectively refused it now?
So if I could just explain, you're the planning authority and the highways are consultees, just as other bodies are, I don't know, Environment Agency, Highways England, other bodies. So you're the determining authority. The Highway Authority make their comments, and it's for us as officers to either agree with those comments or not agree with those. And in this instance, the Highway Authority have suggested that they wouldn't object if there is a condition to provide a footpath. And we've heard speakers talk about the need for that footpath in connection with the sustainable cycling and walking loop within Farnham. However, as a planning authority, we need to actually look at what's being proposed in terms of conditions and any footpath improvements, and actually they need to meet a test of whether they are needed to make this development acceptable. So whilst there may have been discussions about the desirability of this, we need to, as a planning authority, look at, is this footpath necessary to make this development acceptable? And obviously if it isn't, then that would be potentially a reason for refusal. The planning authorities of the view that the footpath, whilst it might be desirable, it might have wider benefits, it's not actually strictly necessary to make this specific development acceptable. And therefore, for that reason, whilst we are reporting to you the objections of the Highway Authority, we are not saying that that objection is grounds to refuse this planning application.
Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm coming back to the change of use because it was part of an application. It wasn't the whole planning application. It was part of it. And this land was marketed as Sang land. In fact, Waverley looked to buy this, and I did my best to get them to buy it for reasons I'll speak about later. I mean, if this was like marketed as Sang, not as a Sang, as Sang land to be an extension of Farnham Park, which was what it was given permission for, I don't understand how people can buy land as a Sang because that's what it was marketed for, because that at the time was its designation. How suddenly we can leave aside that designation and concentrate on one that was put in earlier. And as far as I know, we say it's been implemented because there's a buffer zone or something. There hasn't been a single burial on that site as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so in terms of what we're looking at, the evidence on the file, and you'll have to accept that both Russell and myself are just looking at the evidence on the file. We haven't been at the authority long enough to actually witness the implementation, but the evidence on the file suggests that permission was implemented, so the permission for the cemetery was, so that is the lawful use of the land. You can market something for anything. It doesn't need planning permission. You can try and sell this piece of land for, I don't know, a play park or something. But, nobody has bought the land and sought to implement the later permission to change this from a cemetery to a Sang.
Sorry, Chairman, but that's just not true. After this was designated Sang, it was marketed as Sang. I mean, that was the whole point, and that was why Waverley got involved with trying to buy the Sang, but they were outbid on their bid for Sang land. And, that's just a fact.
So can I, I'm not doubting, and I'm not saying that isn't factually correct, but factually, this site, from the planning file, the evidence is that the cemetery permission has been implemented. there's no evidence that the SANG permission was then implemented. So whilst it may have been granted a permission, marketed as a SANG, the use today is as was granted permission in 2010.
Any other member want to ask a technical question before we move to the debate? No. Right, let's move to the debate. Councillor wishes to start the debate.
I always want to go second, but there's a limit to how long you can wait, isn't there? I don't know where to begin, really. I mean, you've heard so many arguments, good arguments from both councillors, members of the public. You know, this is the first report from either an officer of this council or an inspector that does not try to defend the openness of this land. You can go back to March 23. You'll be glad to know I've read them all over the weekend. I don't intend to quote from them all, otherwise we would be here all night. But it states quite clearly in the implementation of the 2009-1407, cemeteries and woodland burial sites are considered acceptable in principle in countryside areas, because this is what this is designated as separately, because they retain the openness of the area and are a form of community use. The land, the subject of this application, plays a significant role in separating Hale and Upper Hale from Central Farnham. The importance of this space was noted by the inspector in March 2003. The history of avoiding built form on this site goes back and is consistent. It's not something we've suddenly dreamt. And the conclusion of that report in 2009, the proposed use of the application site for a cemetery and woodland burial site would maintain the open character of the area, and with careful planting would over time enhance the character and appearance of the area whilst maintaining the important visual break between Hale and Central Farnham. It goes on and on. Every single time we have gone to appeal, the inspector has backed up our decision not to allow built form on this site. It is adjacent to Farnham Park. It is part of it's part of the visual aspect, if you like, of Farnham Park. And at the moment, it's not a thing of great beauty, but it does give that openness towards the St John's Church, towards the park. It is part of the open countryside that we have sought to protect for years, long before the neighbourhood plan. 2003, we were at those appeals fighting off built form. In the 2016 one that some of us were involved in, or 2019 when it came in, the later one, again, when we put the SANG forward, that application, it was described in the officer's report as a significant benefit given the long-term need for additional SANG in order to deliver the housing identified in the Waverley Local Plan and Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. This proposal for SANG, which provides for outdoor leisure and recreation, is compatible with the site's semi-rural character and its designations as countryside beyond the green belt. We have always tried desperately hard to make sure that we keep this openness. And when we were working with the officer, it actually says in the report in 2019, the proposal would form an extension to the existing Farnham Park SANG. I think it was the Mayor of Farnham, I may be wrong, but he pointed out, if we don't have any extra SANG in Farnham, and you can tell me this is irrelevant to this, but I'm still going to say it, if we don't have an extension to Farnham Park or another part of SANG in Farnham, we will not be able to build a single dwelling in the town on brownfield site, not a single one, because no brownfield site in the town can actually build its own SANG. So as somebody again said, it will be all open space on the outskirts of the town with bespoke SANG. The government wants us to prioritise brownfield, and when we were giving permission in 2019 to maintain the openness of this ground, it was with that view in mind, that ultimately Farnham Park is a finite resource, it's going to run out. In fact, it's going to run out more quickly than we thought because of other permissions, and we are desperately in need of SANG. And just finally, because I think everybody has said it, the inspector again in 23 was worried about the substantial urbanisation of the countryside with what was proposed for the burial site. But he did say that because it was limited in terms of the length of the path, because they were going to try and use attractive materials, it would be, they would try to keep it to the minimum. What we're being offered here is the complete urbanisation of this site. Don't pretend it's anything else. It's a huge car park. It's a huge road. This road is going to be visible right across to the park. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. It's vast. And that building is huge. There's nothing, anything like that size anywhere near in this area. So I am just staggered, really, that we have come to this committee with the first recommendation ever to build a building on that site. And I think for so many reasons, no problem at all with the woodland burial site, no problem at all with that. That was going to be, you know, we hoped it would be modest as all the sites are. There is no burial ground in Farnham with a building on it that serves the funerals, none at all. We have an old chapel that's used by a sculptor. We've turned 2 chapels into a garden. Everybody else just comes, small groups round the grave, having had a service or something elsewhere. This is completely out of character with that area, and it is completely at odds with every other burial ground that we actually have within the town. I'm sorry, no problem with the burial, woodland burial, plenty of problems with the urbanisation of this site, the sheer scale of what's proposed. And don't get me on the Hale Road. I mean, you never, ever try to go up that road without queuing, doesn't matter what time of day. And if you imagine the cars that are going to be coming, because nobody's going to cycle from the station, I can tell you that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, when this started, I did get a little bit confused, as I said, with the Farnham objection on the mortuary, which the officer tells us isn't allowed. It's not a mortuary at all. That's the wrong term. And the parking, because it was pointed out that there's plenty of parking on site if they do what they do. So I did feel that that was an objection that I couldn't go along with. However, listening to the very good speakers, particularly Councillor Coburn, etc., about open spaces, and again coming from one of the speakers about the carbon being emitted on the journeys to and from this burial site, I think I have found alternatives to the Farnham objection. So I don't think I could approve this on the grounds of openness and on the grounds of the carbon emissions. I think we need to protect our open spaces. As you all know, I'm a Hazelmere councillor, and we have great problems protecting our open spaces there. So I would go along with Farnham and say we need to make sure we do protect open spaces and sane land. Thank you.
Councillor Weldon.
Once again, there we go. Thank you. We have heard some very strong and very persuasive objections on a number of grounds. However, I am concerned that there is one really important aspect of this application that so far everybody just about has ignored. And that is that, sadly enough, death is an inescapable fact of life. It is one that we all have to deal with at some stage. And how we deal with death varies from community to community and across faith traditions. In some faith traditions are far more meticulous in how they deal with death than others. And the fact is that this particular group takes death not more seriously than anybody else, but are more precise in the procedures that they need. And one of the things that they need to bury their dead is a place to prepare the body for burial. That's not put it into a mortuary, but they need a building where they can prepare their dead for burial. The only place they can do that at this stage appears to be Brookwood, which is filling up. So the question then is, what are they to do? I think we need to respect all communities and accept that all communities need provision to bury their dead. Thank you.
Councillor Rossi.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a number of reasons that I'm actually surprised this has come to committee for approval. I'm very concerned about the size and scale of the building on this site. And again, I'll reiterate the loss of openness. And I think the previous planning application and history all demonstrate that. What benefit is this application to the Farnham community? I can't see that there is one. Certainly for transport reasons as well. I'm concerned about the access on that busy road. And I wonder, I don't know at what stage these other new developments have been assessed in terms of looking at the transport plan at the same time. Have all the local developments been assessed at the same time? Maybe you could answer that. But it does seems to me as well, why are we encouraging emissions, not just across Waverley, but across all of the other areas that would cross into Waverley as well from the Brookwood area, encouraging people to arrive in vans or buses? I mean, that's nice to suggest, but in reality, I suspect people will be arriving by car in by themselves or in small groups. So for that reason, for those reasons, and actually just generally the size and scale of that building, I am minded to not approve. Thank you.
Councillor White, then Councillor Keane, and then Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that Councillor Coburn put everything very eloquently, and I totally 100% agree with what she said. And I would like to just, for Councillor Weldon, again, I agree with what he's saying, and I agree that we all need places for burial. We all have different ways of doing it. The question here is this site an appropriate place for that to take place? For me, the major concern, having lived in Farnham for many years, is the traffic on that road. And I'm sorry to sound selfish, but there is always tailbacks. You've got Farnham Hospital, which generates a lot of traffic coming up to the Six Bells roundabout. You've got the Hale Junction, the lights, which is a restricted junction, is dangerous anyway, and the volume of traffic tails back in both directions there, in fact, from the Hale Road as well. And I find it incredibly difficult to understand how highways have allowed this based on just the densities of traffic that occur at many times of the day. And I think what would make it even worse, I'm presuming, a condition could not be put on when these burials can take place during the day. And if that's the case, and a burial is chosen at 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, it will gridlock back to the Sainsbury's roundabout. So I know that Highways have approved it, but I really want the other members to know that this is a serious bottleneck here, a real problem. Thank you.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor White has said quite a bit of what I was going to say, but I would like to agree with Councillor Weldon that we all respect other faiths' needs, and it's not about that. It's about whether this building is in the right place to provide those needs. I'm also concerned that really there is no benefit to the local community at all from this building, and the only thing that Farnham is going to get from this is a very large carbon footprint, which really they don't need, considering the problems they have with traffic now in Farnham. Thank you.
Ward.
Thank you, Chair. This application actually seems to break a few records. I've been on planning committees almost as long as Councillor Coburn, and neither of us are going to tell you how long that is. But I think this one seems to breach more parts of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan than any application that's come before us ever. Something else I find worrying but fascinating is whenever we as councillors say we don't like the ideas that highways have brought forward and therefore we are thinking of objecting to something, for the last 15 years I've been told by officers, oh no, 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 they are the consultee and they are the right people. And suddenly we're being told by officers, oh no, no, we can override the Highways Commission, that's fine. Looking at a few things, is it a mortuary or isn't it a mortuary? Well, the mortuary is a place for storing bodies, preparing them for burial. This place has a fridge, and lost somewhere in the verbiage, I heard the phrase that they were possibly going to come the night before. It's a mortuary. In environmental benefit, I heard the gentleman who was supporting the application say, I have no idea what environmental benefit he was referring to, but I failed to see one. I then look at this list on the board. This is a very interesting list. The use of the site as a burial ground is already approved. Tick, fine. The building is of a high design quality from a UK award-winning architect. So if I pop out tomorrow and find myself an award-winning architect and get him to build a monstrosity in my back garden, it will be fine. What is that doing up there? Lack of a detrimental impact upon the landscape, character and heritage assets? I disagree. Benefits from the planting of 300 trees. The idea of this is that it's an open space that people can look around. So 300 trees actually doesn't seem to be a benefit to me. Biodiversity net gain, 20.21%. My goodness me, I'm an engineer and I've never done things quite that accurately in my life. 20.21% of habitats and 34.82%. Where do these figures come from? I'm just amazed that they're up there. Highways conditions can be dealt with by restrictive conditions. Maybe. We're going to have a travel plan asking people to come in buses. So if I roll up to this funeral in my car, I'm going to be told to go away because I didn't come in a bus. This is nonsense. I'm sorry, I just find this unbelievable. I will not go to repeat the fact that it's supposed to be of use to the local community and is none whatsoever. This is appalling. And I have heard not one thing in its favour. And to pick up this idea of preparing bodies and people having different views on deaths, I'm sure they're preparing their bodies quite adequately in Brookwood and could bring them here in a refrigerated van. So I see no reason whatsoever for this application to be approved. And unless I hear something remarkable in the next few minutes, I shall certainly vote against it.
Thank you. Councillor Rivers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got just a couple of comments, really. One is, or a question, one is, does the parish church have enough car parking? Is 23 additional spaces of community benefit? I'd like that question answered if possible. The other is, I'm all for the reduction of carbon, absolutely. However, if 180 people were coming to Farnham High Street 3 times a week to buy whatever they wanted to buy, would there be any objection?
I'll answer the question that Councillor Rivers has put.
So just about the car parking of 23 additional spaces, believe that it was agreed to provide these as part of the 2019 application in negotiations between the church and the landowner. So I would say that they are required for the church, otherwise they wouldn't be proposed.
Okay, any other councillor wish to speak on this item? Right. Councillor Fairclough, you still have the right for 4 minutes for, if you so wish. Do you wish to speak?
First, I must apologise to councillors that an awful lot of what I'm about to say has already been debated and by your good selves, so please accept my apologies. This is an application for a large building that will have no benefit to the local community, a large 180-person capacity building for the sole use of a London-based community. A building to be located in an area of great landscape value, next to a Grade 2 listed deer park and the 180-year-old Grade 2 listed St John's Church. A building to be built in an area that is characterised by gently undulating open grassland. And by the way, that description isn't just mine. It's the opinion of the planning inspector at the Oast House Lane appeal last September. He noted, and here I'm quoting directly, so please excuse the use of acronyms, development would represent a harmful incursion into the countryside that would not protect or respect the AGLV designation and would cause harm to the character and appearance of the area as a whole. The proposal therefore conflicts with policies RE1 and RE3 of the LPP1 and policies FNP10 and FNP11 of the FNP, which, amongst other things, seeks to protect the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, particularly from inappropriate development, and to retain the distinctive character of the AGLV for its own sake. This application does not propose siting the building in gently undulating open grassland. It proposes a formal garden with the building hidden by dense woodland planting, 300 trees. A proposal that will completely change the character of the wonderful landscape behind Farnham Park. Permission was granted for this land to become a woodland burial. However, it was based on supporting local needs in the most low-impact way possible, and this is not a low-impact application. It will change the appearance of a recognised area of great landscape value. There are proposals for earth moving and levelling that do not respect the landscape contours. It includes a mortuary, and it is a mortuary, for body preparation that does not appear to meet disease control standards. Travellers from London will bring significant travel congestion, air pollution and carbon impact, as they would if they were coming to shop in Farnham. But however, I doubt people will come from London to shop in Farnham. There are already 2 businesses marketing cemeteries and memorial grounds on this site. The potential for permission creep and a massive intensification of use on this site is highly significant. Earlier this evening, I asked 5 questions about this application. I will now ask a 6th. Is this application for a large 180-person capacity building appropriate to the area and the local community? The only answer that I can give you is no. I hope that you will agree and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fairclough. Right. Well, this is a very sensitive application, as we are, I think we all accept. However, I've heard quite a lot in the debate so far that makes me wonder whether, in fact, the recommendation, as stated, would in fact gain approval. This is my right, if I so wish, to ask the committee whether they wish to propose an alternative recommendation to this particular application, i.e. for a refusal and on what grounds. Does any member wish to propose such an alternative recommendation? Councillor Coburn.
So I would propose that this application should be refused, and it would be contrary to the development plan as a whole. And I would quote policies, the countryside policies from the local plan. I would quote the FDA, the Farm Design Statement, the neighbourhood plan policies. We've heard them tonight. 1, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 30, probably others. Basically, I feel this is contrary to the development plan, and the harm to the local area and the openness of this site is not, there are no benefits that outweigh that harm. Thank you.
Does anybody wish to second the, yes? Councillor Ward, that was quick. Councillor Ward, second.
Some things have to be done quickly, and I totally agree with everything Councillor Cohen has said.
Councillor Colburn, could you just read back your reasons for this refusal, please?
So members, I think what you're proposing is that you want to vote on refusing this application on the grounds of the erection of the proposed building of a size and the erection of a building of the size and scale proposed on this site would affect the openness of the site, impacting on the character of the area. As such, the proposal will be contrary to adopted policies, in particular, and I'm not going to read out all the policies, but countryside policies of the local plan and policies FNP 1, 10, 11, 30, 12, 13 and 30 of the neighbourhood plan.
Councillor Colburn?
Yes, I think so. It's also the urbanisation. It's the amount of hard standing as well as the built form that we've always tried to stop happening on this site. I mean, the site is meant to be an open green space. So any of the increased urbanisation from the roads and the parking, I think would still would add to the harm, if you like, to the character of the and appearance of the countryside.
So just play that back then. The sort of primary issue that I think I'm hearing you all say is that the size of the building and its setting in the landscape would affect the openness of the area. So the size of the building, I'm just trying to understand how a path's going to affect the openness. The size of the building, so the erection of the building, the size and scale, together with associated paths and parking would affect, is that?
It's all the ancillary work, because you've still got the, whatever it is, a little, it's called substation or whatever, with fencing. I mean, it's all the work needed to make this building viable in terms of people accessing it. And I think the urbanisation, you know, at the moment when you look at that site, you don't see any of that. There is some informal parking, which is shared. And, you know, this is so, it's just urbanising. I mean, you can't use any other word for it. And it is what the inspector said in 2003, you know, that even with the limited amount that was with that permission, it was just about acceptable. Whereas this is on a much bigger scale. So, yeah, I think we've got to make something about that, but it's, yeah.
I think we can agree the final wording, can we?
I think we need to be fairly clear what we're voting on. So I think it's the erection of the building together with all the ancillary infrastructure would affect the openness. So are you members? So is it the building and the ancillary infrastructure?
Sorry, we're going round in circles here, aren't we? I was just trying to find out what the inspector said when he dismissed in 2018, you know, because he made it very, very clear that The site is not only the divine countryside outside the urban boundary, but it is a valued landscape within an area of great landscape value that is protected by policies in recent plans by the framework. In terms of the environmental role, the harm would significantly outweigh the benefits. The environmental harm would be significant and would be sufficient to outweigh the benefits. So basically, you know, he is saying exactly the thing, that it is the openness that he was trying to protect.
And the openness that what I'm hearing you articulate to me is that the building of this size in this location, together with sort of the ancillary parking, access, etc., would impact and affect the openness of the site, and for those reasons it'd be unacceptable in policy.
Yes, I think so. I mean, there's any chance to see it in writing at some point?
I think that'd be a very good idea, actually.
No, sorry, members, you're voting on a reason for refusal, so we can't go away from the meeting, and similarly, we can't have notes be given from speakers and notes being made. So you need to be very clear what it is you're refusing this application on. And I've heard a number of you talk to me about the openness, the size of the building, the way it sits in the landscape, and its impact on the openness. That is what you have all said. So I'm playing back to you as your reason for refusal that what you are saying that you want to vote on is that the proposed building as a would affect the openness of the site and impact on the character of the area.
I think we can agree that.
And when do we mention policies, Chairman? I mean,
Yes,
because
yeah,
it's contrary to our...
And we mentioned all those policies.
We mentioned the
yes.
policies we feel it's
And
contrary.
all the policies that have been mentioned that I've read. So the countryside policies in your local plan and the policies in the neighbourhood plan, which is FNP 1, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 30.
Okay. Right, is everybody quite clear on that? Yeah. Right, now we're voting on the alternative recommendation, which is refusal from the grounds that have been stated. So if you wish to vote for that recommendation of refusal, please press yes, i.e. the green button. If you wish to vote against, red, and if you wish to abstain, the yellow one. Whatever. Thank you very much. Do we have a result?
Okay, so that's 11 votes in favour, 3 against and 1 abstention, and the alternative recommendation is carried.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you. We can move on if people wish to have a 1 minute break while we clear the, well, a minute break, okay, while we clear the public gallery.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just finishing you. So.
Tynefield, the Avenue Rowridge, Farnham, GU10 4BD, the erection of 2 dwellings and associated works, extensions and alterations to existing dwelling following demolition of eastern section. Officers, Tracy Farthing, could you please present Tracy?
Thank you, Chairman. There has been 2 additional representations since the agenda has been published. The representations do not raise new matters for consideration. One reiterates previous objections and another summarises issues that are to be voiced this evening. Permission is sought for the erection of 2 dwellings on the land to the south of the host dwelling at Highfield, the demolition of the eastern section of the current building at Highfield, to provide access to the new dwellings at the rear. And the application includes the retention of 2 outbuildings to the north of the existing dwelling. The application site is located within the developed area. Dwellings are generally detached, sited within spacious plots, and there is no rigid pattern of development. To the north of the application site, shown in the opaque box, there are several examples of infill development. This is the existing site plan, with the existing dwelling circled for identification. There are a number of TPO trees and tree groups on the site, but no other landscape constraints. This slide seeks to demonstrate that the land to the south has been subject to a proposed development. A scheme for 9 dwellings was initially refused by the council and later allowed at appeal. The image on the left shows that the existing site in the context of the consented 9 dwellings to the south. Whilst this permission has now lapsed, there are current schemes pending for the site, one of which is indicated in the bottom right image. This is the existing dwelling on site. It's a 2-storey dwelling and it's not of any particular architectural merit. The scheme would see 2 additional dwellings erected on the site to the southeast of the existing dwelling. The existing dwelling is retained on the site, but altered to facilitate access to the new dwellings and itself extended to the north. The two outbuildings to the north of the site will be retained as existing. They're shown in the photos on the left-hand side. The alterations to the host dwelling, Unit 2, as proposed on the block plan, include the reduction of built form on its northeastern side and an increase in built form on the northwestern part of the building, particularly at first floor, where the existing dwelling's roof slopes to a single storey. The resultant building has an altogether different aesthetic, appearing as a more typical two-storey dwelling. This will then be reclad and altered into a similar palette of materials to the new proposed dwellings. Unit 3 would be orientated in a similar layout to Unit 2. Materials would comprise a mixture of handmade clay tiles and facing at first floor level, with the lower part of the ground floor constructed from brick. Unit 2 includes a balcony on its southeast elevation. Unit 1 would be located 20 metres to the northeast. Separated by a fenced-off area, trees and vegetation, the plot would benefit from off-street parking access via the curved driveway. Visually similar in terms of materials to Units 2 and 3. Unit 1 would provide 4 bedrooms at first floor and a generous living area. It, like Unit 3, includes a balcony on the southeastern elevation. In terms of residential amenity, there is over 24 metres between the proposed dwellings and any neighbouring properties. There are no first floor windows located on Unit 2, the original dwelling, that would face 28 Mayfield. The site has been subject to some tree felling prior to the application being submitted. This was investigated by the council's tree officer and a TPO was served on a group of trees, G1. This TPO doesn't mean that the proposal cannot be implemented. It serves to seeks to protect the remaining trees in order that future occupiers cannot fell trees or undertake works without permission from the local planning authority. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we have public speakers on this item, and I would point out actually that one of the members here is in fact Councillor Ward, who seems to have disappeared for a minute, but he would not be able to participate or vote in this particular application. Right, the speakers are Mr. Tom Nixon, sorry. You've got 4 minutes, Mr. Nixon. 4 minutes to speak from when you start speaking.
Good evening, councillors. I am Tom Nixon. I live at 24 Mayfield along with my wife and 3 young children, which is one of the properties which will be significantly impacted by the proposed development. The design of the proposed units is very unsympathetic to the location, specifically to current residents in the neighbouring properties. The design specifically of Unit 3, with a balcony above the kitchen on the south end of the property, almost appears to try to maximise the potential for loss of privacy through overlooking to my property and especially to my neighbours at 22 Mayfield. The document prepared for this meeting on the details of the case even states that the balcony is directed towards the neighbouring amenity space and poorly screened by boundary vegetation, would introduce overlooking and would harmfully impact the privacy enjoyed by the occupiers of number 22 Mayfield. However, having stated this, the report then goes on to say the development will not result in harm to residential amenity and so is in accordance with the relevant neighbourhood plan policies. This conclusion is surely wrong based on the earlier acknowledgement, so the development is in clear conflict with the neighbourhood plan policies. Although the council is looking to increase housing land supply, the same increase of just 2 houses could be achieved with more modest-sized properties, such as a pair of semi-detached houses without balconies, situated more sympathetically on the plot to avoid loss of privacy for neighbours. Rowledge is not in need of 2 more very large £1 million-plus houses. It needs more affordable accommodation. Further, I believe there's an inaccuracy in the report around the weighting between national policy and the up-to-date Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, specifically because the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan is less than 5 years old. National policy says if there is a conflict with the Neighbourhood Plan, as the report is identified through a harmful impact on privacy that I just mentioned, for a neighbourhood plan that is less than 5 years old, which Farnham's is, the presumption to follow the national policy should not apply, and the full weight should be given to the Neighbourhood Plan and harm to amenity, etc. Given the clear conflict presented here, the presumption in favour of this development does not apply despite the housing shortfall. Please refer to paragraph 14 of the National Planning Policy Framework from December 2023. And the application should be determined in accordance with the local policies. On this basis alone, should be refused. In the report, please note also that in condition 13, it states that screening should be installed on the eastern side of the balcony of Unit 3. I believe this to be an error, as any screen on the balcony of Unit 3 would need to be on the west and southern side to have any effect. The land proposed for the development was, up until just before the planning application, left wild with many mature trees providing a diverse woodland habitat. Just before the planning application was first submitted, a systematic process of tree felling and clearance was carried out. This was identified during a visit with a Waverley Tree Officer in fourth quarter 22. Following this visit in January of 2023, a TPO was placed on the site to replant 19 trees, including replacing 15 oaks. This is in addition to the trees that remain at the boundary. None of this replanting has been carried out, and the location of Unit 1 and the overlap with the area identified for the replanting seems completely at odds. I see no way that the property could be located and the trees adequately be replaced in the space identified. As already mentioned before, the tree felling and ground clearance, the area provided a diverse habitat for wildlife. Even since the tree felling, the reptile report has highlighted a significant number of reptiles and amphibians still occupying the site, and we regularly see bats flying in the evening in the warmer months into our garden from the proposed development plot. Developing the units proposed would further degrade the location and remove an area of woodland which wildlife can occupy, as well as use to move from one woodland location to another. The reptile report has detailed ways to move the reptiles on site and create a reptile corridor, but this appears to miss the point that the development will destroy a great percentage of the habitat that currently exists. The wildlife does not need a corridor. It requires an area that has been wild for a very long time to be preserved. Like the two councillors who requested the case to be presented tonight in the Farnham Town Council, my neighbours and I see this as a case of overdevelopment, which results in a loss of woodland, wild habitat, and is in conflict with the neighbourhood plan policy, and delivers very little gain for the community. And I urge the council to refuse the proposal.
Thank you very much. Before moving on to the next speaker, Councillor Ward, this is your ward, isn't it? So
it is, so I shall not be speaking or voting.
And you should move to the back, I believe, is the procedure, yes, please. Sorry. Okay, but you have the right for 4 minutes before and 4 minutes after, if you so wish. But anyway, the next speaker is Michael Connolly. Michael, you got 4 minutes to speak from when you start. Good to see you again.
Good evening, councillors. I am not going to go through the merits of the scheme. They're dealt with in the report provided by the officer, but I'm solely going to deal with the concerns which have been raised by the other objector. Firstly, concern has been raised about the balcony to unit number 3, and the applicant has confirmed he'd be happy for a condition to be applied to a consent, removing that balcony in its entirety. Other concerns were raised by the objector about overlooking. There are no other issues. Every other window complies with separation distances contained in the residential extensions SPD produced by the council. With that one amendment made, one of the principal objections should fall away. The garden was never woodland in totality. It used to be a large garden, and the pond at the rear was an ornamental pond. Through the passage of time, it has become wilded. Trees have been removed from the site prior to the application being made. These were all assessed by a professional arboriculturalist, and a lot of poor quality trees were removed and good quality ones were retained. A significant amount of effort was made to ensure that good quality trees were maintained and the houses sited accordingly. You will note from the site plan that you'll have seen there's a significant number of trees which are still in place. Most developers would probably have actually just taken the lot away. We have tried to ensure that the sylvan setting that was in place before the application is made will be retained if the application is consented and the scheme is implemented. There's appropriate mitigation for the wildlife on site, and the reports, if read, will show that there will be all the appropriate measures taken to ensure that the wildlife present at the moment will be retained and will be protected. There has been comments about the tree preservation order tree having been felled. There was a tree preservation order tree which fell in a gale, and that has been cut down. And I'm sure that if the council wanted a statutory declaration from the applicant, they would provide it. That is just misinformation. In terms of character of the area, the plot sizes are generous. The house sizes in the area are large as well. I think somebody objected to live in houses that are larger than the houses which are being created. It should also be noted that the house to be retained and altered is reduced in size and its appearance is enhanced significantly. These are reasonable sized houses in good sized plots which respect the character of the area and actually enhance the appearance of the plot through dealing with what is currently an inappropriately designed 1960s disaster box which currently sits there. This application will improve the appearance from the highway and will improve the character of the area. The applicant could have taken down all the trees and put 7 or 8 houses on the plot. He was advised by his consultants not to do this, that the appropriate thing to do was to retain the character and have a very loose, characterful and totally appropriate development, which is what we have here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward, you said you didn't wish to speak on this item, correct?
I may wish to speak at the end.
Fair enough. Right. Okay. Right. First of all, any detailed questions to the officer about this application first? Coburn.
Well, it's just really about that balcony. I mean, we are able to take it out because I think that's would have been a real stumbling block for us, and it is firm enough in if we grant, but they say that as a condition that balcony be removed. That would make sure it was removed. Is that true?
So just to advise members, I'd advise not going down that route. If members were minded to approve the application tonight, I would delegate authority for us to get a revised set of plans that actually take that balcony out altogether, and then we would revise condition 2 so that it then approved the plans that showed the plan without the balcony rather than trying to deal with it by condition, if that makes sense.
Can I just quickly back then? So basically you're saying if we can't do it that way, we have to refuse it?
No, what I'm saying is if you're minded to approve, rather than have a set of plans, approve a set of plans that have got balcony on and then rely on a condition saying don't put the balcony on, that you just delegate authority to me to approve, subject to a further plan that takes the balcony off, and then we approve those plans, and then everything's clear and very watertight.
Any other technical questions of the officer? Councillor White.
I think this is technical. Could I just ask the officer, the speaker in favour of the recommendation did seem to include a lot of information and facts, which admittedly somewhere in our notes it's there, but is the officer content that what the speaker has said tonight is in accordance with all the information that she's previously had, obviously accepting the balcony? But there were other points that were made. Is the officer satisfied? Thank you.
If you're speaking specifically in terms of the tree felling, I don't know the reason for the tree felling. But when I went on site back in, I believe it was around September 2022, the trees were felled at that point. So they had been taken down prior to the application being submitted. And I can confirm that one of the oak trees had fallen, because when I was on site that time, it was evident that it had fallen, so it hadn't been maliciously cut down.
Any other technical question? Yes, Councillor Steiger.
I see that the town council are objecting also because of the biodiversity. Is there a biodiversity net gain percentage? I can't quite see it.
There isn't a biodiversity net gain condition put on because it doesn't bite yet. It's a smaller site, so it's only for the major sites that the legislation kicks in.
Right. We'll move on to any debate. Does anyone wish to debate this particular item yet? Austin, sorry.
Well, it was just to confirm that my issue would have been the balcony. And apart from that, this looks like a perfectly acceptable development to me. It's always regrettable to hear about the loss of trees pre-application. But other than that, I am minded to approve. Thank you.
Any other member wishing to speak? Councillor Ward, you have the opportunity for 4 minutes if you so wish.
I will not make use of my full 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. You know, I note that Farnham Town Council, although they object, are not speaking against it at the moment. I have reservations about it on the grounds raised by Farnham Town Council, but that is all I wish to say.
Thank you very much. Right. Well, we'll move to the recommendation, which is that subject to conditions 1 to 13 and informatives 1 to 4, and also the fact of the delegation to the head of planning about the revised plans for the balcony. Permission be granted. Those who wish to vote in favour of that recommendation, please press green and red if not, and yellow for abstain. Whatever. Thank you.
So that's 13 in favour and 0 against and 1 abstention. So the updated recommendation is carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Shall we move on? The next application has been withdrawn. That was the Bourne because you're Farnham. And so we move on to the next application, which is WA 2022-02194, Hurst Farm, Chapel Lane, Godalming. This was a hybrid application, including full planning application for the erection of 216 dwellings, a new farm shop, use class E, change of use of existing farm shop building to rural business hub, use class E, provision of public open space, new sports pitches and associated infrastructure, landscaping, drainage, parking and formation of new access points following the demolition of existing buildings, outline an application with all matters reserved except access for the erection of a new health hub, following demolition of the existing Black Farm. Now, the officer to present this is Russell Brown. I would like to make the point here that this application was previously accepted, and in fact, it's only coming back here for the fact that the Section 106 agreement tied to this has not been concluded. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. So there is no presentation. So the recommendation to the committee is that delegated authority is granted to the Executive Head of Planning Development to grant planning permission subject to conditions and the completion of a 106.
Right, now we do have a public speaker on this because technically, of course, it has lapsed, of course. Really, that's Councillor Gale. Councillor Gale, you have 4 minutes to speak if you so wish.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, when this application came to committee in August 23, the committee were unanimously in support, and I see no reason why it will not be granted again tonight by committee. I really just wanted to speak tonight as I am disappointed that it has been necessary to bring this back to committee due to running out of time finalising the legal agreements. And I hope going forward Waverley Borough Council will work to avoid such eventualities again. These delays cause unnecessary cost in man hours and cost to the developers, and more importantly in this particular case the landowner has been unable to schedule the planting seasons for the agricultural side of the business. I've got one request. Could the officers give us a realistic date or time frame tonight for when all the necessary paperwork will be completed by Waverley Borough Council so our local business and the developer can make plans for the next phase of this much needed housing development? Thank you.
So just to inform the committee, we do have a draft legal agreement that's been travelling between the parties. So that needs to be finalised with all the necessary searches, etc., done and sealing So realistically, I think that should be done within the next 8 weeks.
Right, okay, right, any technical question on this or, no? Debate, does anyone wish to debate this?
Don't really want to debate it, Chairman, but I can't resist saying what I said last time, because it's so disappointing this hasn't moved forward, because it was exactly the sort of application that we want, of a developer working with the parish councillors who did a sterling job and the local community to get something they wanted. And it's rather disappointing. I thought we'd be halfway to building it by now with no dissent anywhere. So, you know, I'll keep you to that 8 weeks. Let's hope we can get it done. But it is, you know, very good development, and it's done in the correct way with the developer consulting, properly consulting, not just having a weekend with a piece of paper hanging up on a board and saying, well, this is what we're going to do. I mean, it really was, you know, quite a good model for us all to follow, and I hope that we have others like this in the future. But I sincerely hope this one goes ahead as quickly as we can. I mean, Milford does need these developments, doesn't it? So, thank you, Chairman.
Any other councillor wish to debate this? No. Councillor Gale, do you want to? You have the right to another 4 minutes if you so wish.
No, just to say 8 weeks. I hope it is no more than 8 weeks. Thank you.
Well, yeah, okay. All right, well, we're going to move to the recommendation then, aren't we? The recommendation being that delegated authority be granted to the Executive Head of Planning Development to grant planning permission subject to conditions, including minor amendments to recommended conditions and the completion of a legal agreement securing affordable housing, healthcare hub, off-site pedestrian cycleway for sustainable transport provision, open space, SUDS and place-based maintenance. Those in favour, please press green, plus against, red, or abstain, yellow. Thank you.
I'm the ward councillor, so I can't vote, but I won't use my 4 minutes to make statements, all right? Okay. So that's unanimously accepted.
Thank you very much. Now we come to applications which are not for public speaking, well, technically not for public speaking, and the first one being WA 2021-01837, land centre coordinates 506215, 140275, South Hamlets Lane, north of Russet Grove, Cranley. Outline application for erection up to 12 dwellings and associated works with all matters reserved as amended by drainage information received on the 20th of August 2021. Amended plans and transport statement received 2nd November 2022 and drainage and agricultural information received on the 17th of March 23 and an amended description. And the office is presented Alistair Dejew. Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. So this application, it's for a smaller development coming back for a similar reason. Outline application for erection of up to 12 dwellings with associated works on land south of Hamlets Lane and north of Russet Grove in Cranley. This application has also been brought back to Planning Committee as a result of the Section 106 agreement not having been completed within 6 months of the resolution to grant permission in July 2023. I can confirm that preparation of the draft agreement is at an advanced stage, and the applicant was very keen to actually have a signed agreement by the time they got to committee. It hasn't quite got there, but it is. I can say it is very advanced. Should be noted that the committee had voted unanimously in favour of the officer's previous recommendation to grant approval. The application again is just for an extension of time for the completion of the Section 106 agreement. And just to reiterate, the agreement will obviously secure the provision of affordable housing, access to and maintenance of place, space and a public open space, subject to conditions and informatives.
Thank you very much. No public speakers. Any technical questions? Again, it's another 106 agreement extension. Anybody? No. Debate? Anybody wish to contribute? No? Right. Then we move to the recommendation. That subject to the applicant entering into an appropriate legal agreement to secure the provision of affordable housing, access and maintenance of places, home, public open space, and subject to conditions and informatives that outline planning should be granted. Those in favour press green, against red, and abstain yellow.
Thank you, Chair. Again, that one was passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. Right, we can move on finally to the, thank you, Alistair.
Thank you.
We move on to the final application tonight to be considered, which is WA 2023-02717, the land at Lambeth Bank, 26 Chalk Road, Godalming, GU73AP, the construction of a patio on retaining walls, a retrospective application, and the officer is Gillian Fensom to present the report. Gillian?
I'll just share my screen. Oh, is that there? Yeah. So this is an application for a raised front patio and grassed area. The ground level of the top patio and grassed area has been raised by 1 metre, an additional 1.5 metres in depth. There are stone retaining walls, a picket fence, lower landscaped area, and a new pathway. There's been one objection from a neighbour on the following grounds: visually intrusive with raised seating and viewing area, overlooking of neighbouring properties, potential noise disturbance, removal of vegetation from the site, effects on stability of land which could affect neighbouring properties. Key issues are that the front garden has a pleasant outlook towards the Lammas lands, whereas the rear garden backs onto the Portsmouth to Waterloo railway line. The applicants have constructed a raised patio grassed area to the front to utilise their front garden more effectively, which slopes steeply downwards from north to south. The property previously had 2 smaller patio areas to the front. The proposal is only 1.5 metres deeper than the previous patio areas and 1 metre higher from a point 5 metres from the rear elevation. It is wider than previously. The main part of the patio area is in a step location out of view from the neighbouring property. There's no right to a view in planning, and the development is similar to how a rear garden would be used. Officers are recommending approval. So I've got, that's the site location plan with which shows the railway line to the back and the chalk road to the front. This plan shows the previous patio areas in red dotted line with the previous pathway in green. And the next plan shows those areas again, but then it's got the what is currently there, which is the 2 raised areas, which you can see there. And the pathway to the left, the new pathway to the left. This shows the, it's a section plan showing the previous patio areas in red and the slope of the land in red, and the current areas are in black with green. And this shows the area with views to both sides of the neighbouring properties. These pictures are taken from the neighbouring property of the fenced area and the raised patio. This shows the development from lower down in the property near the road. These are more pictures, so that's the view of the Lammas lands on the left and the view to the neighbouring property on the right. These are more pictures of the Lammas lands and the view from the development. And then this shows the development from further down towards from the road. And then I've just got some pictures of other properties on the street which have got sort of similar developments with the raised patio areas at the front. That's all, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, this item would not normally be due to public speaking, but in fact, since the ward council wishes to speak on this application, I believe, and I'll have 4 minutes for 4 minutes after, and I've had a request from what person who's acting on behalf of the client, or the client itself, Mark Leedale, to present the case. I think in the interest of balance and fairness that I've allowed that at my discretion. So Mark, wherever you are, Mark Leedale, you have 4 minutes to speak on the application when you start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to address the Planning Committee. I do appreciate it. I act on behalf of the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Swadling. I commend your officers on the thoroughness of their report and the manner in which this planning application has been considered. There are 2 matters to be determined. 1, the visual impact from Chalk Road, and 2, the impact on neighbours' amenity. On the matter of visual effect, this is set out in the officer's report, and many of the properties on this part of Chalk Road, as you've seen from the photographs, have similar terraced arrangements so that they may make use of the views from the raised gardens, and because the gardens are at the frontage and face to the south. This property is no different and has always benefited from this arrangement, with a raised terrace close to the house and step terraces down to the level of Chalk Road. This includes retaining walls and soft planted areas, and your officers are of the view that this is acceptable on its merits and is policy compliant. I would add that the planting is not yet matured, and following the works which have taken place in the next spring and summer, this will have an even greater softening effect. On the matter of residential amenity, the report from your officers details the previous arrangement, which comprised 2 terraces either side of what was the former front door. It correctly states that there is no change in levels between the terraced areas and the neighbouring properties. The additional raised areas laid to lawn and the patio areas are actually smaller than was previously the case. In short, there is no material change in the effect in terms of privacy than that which previously existed. The issue of overlooking is one which is a consequence of living in an urban situation and one which neighbours must accept in this context. Indeed, it would be far greater from the windows at the front of the property than is the case from the terrace or the patio or the lawn. In summary, the development which is described in the application and in your officer's report would not lead to a material loss of amenity and is wholly compliant with your planning policies. For these reasons, I urge the committee to grant planning permission in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Williams, as the ward councillor, you have 4 minutes now, and if you so wish, 4 minutes after the debate. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. This may well be a minor application. However, it's very important to local residents. And I've asked it to be raised at this meeting for a number of reasons. First, it is a retrospective application, and I believe that all such applications need to be considered carefully, merely on their own merits, regardless of whether correct procedures have been followed or not. And secondly, I have visited the site, spoken to the neighbour at number 24, and have been made aware through seeing the patio that actually now exists, that has been constructed, involving considerable earth movements. It actually does overlook the neighbouring property to the extent that there is a direct line of vision for someone sitting at one end of the patio into the front room of the neighbour's property at 24 Chalk Road. I do not need to speculate about what this might look like. I've seen the patio firsthand and viewed the potential overlooking the loss of amenity from inside the front room of the neighbour. Now, the context of this application is that it follows on from an application judged not to require prior approval, referred to in the papers, PRA 2020-0022. That application was for the construction of a very large extension to the property, which overshadows the rear garden, and therefore necessitating the conversion of the front of the property to comprise a sitting out area. And so, moving on to the patio area itself, as I suggested earlier, it allows significant and direct views into the front habitable rooms of the neighbouring property, as I think the photographs showed, and the lower front garden area of the neighbour at number 24. The resulting structure is visually obtrusive, raised viewing and seating area that dominates the outlook from the front of the neighbour's property. In addition, the proposal would enable occupiers of number 26 to overlook the front garden of number 24 and look straight into the front rooms of the neighbour's property. So, in addition, while it is of concern in respect of neighbour amenity, the structure that has been installed by the occupants of number 26 is not strong enough to hold back the ground from the neighbour's garden at number 24, and the mature planting may not actually take because of that. Unless restored, it could cause significant structural damage and affect the stability of the land. Now, I think members will undoubtedly want to give serious consideration to the planning grounds for and against this proposal, regardless as to whether it is actually currently built or not. And I hope you will, that members will feel like me that this does have an adverse effect on the neighbour's amenity sufficient to merit refusal of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You will have the opportunity to have another 4 minutes after the debate, should you so wish. Right, technical questions first to the officer. Anybody wish to give a technical question to the officer on this application? Councillor White.
Just a question to the officer. I'm sorry, the photographs were not terribly clear, but maybe you could answer this question. I'm presuming that there can be no condition of screening or height of screening, because that would then be loss of light. Is that the reason for that process?
Planning wants to answer that.
So in terms of screening, well, that's not what's before you. In terms of it's a retrospective application, so you're being asked to consider to give permission to what's before you. So if you wanted to do something else, you'd probably have to defer the application to seek further changes to the scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. I was just looking for a win-win and asking the question. Thank you. That's answered it.
Technical questions? Debate? Anybody in council wishes to debate this issue? Mr. Coburn.
Yes, I mean, I feel that it's perfectly acceptable what's been built. It's very tricky, isn't it, when you've got this land going up and you want to get some space that you can actually use. And it's as if these houses were built the wrong way around, isn't it? And getting a usable space to the north is never a good thing. You want your usable space to the south. I don't know how you get around this, because there are parts of Farnham where you have the land going straight down at the back, and they have the same problem. When you build out your own deck, for a moment you overlook next door, and then when they build out their deck, and so it goes on. But you have no alternative other than sitting on land that's that steep, you know. So I have every sympathy here for the applicant, as long as what we're being told is true, that this is not the only example of this on the road. I think it's perfectly acceptable, and I don't like retrospective planning applications, but I think sometimes you just have to accept that the system hasn't quite worked in the order you wanted it to, but actually I think this is acceptable. Thank you.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Right. Councillor Williams, do you wish to speak again? You have the right, of course.
Only very briefly, I don't intend to use 4 minutes. I recognise Councillor Coburn's point that there are difficulties with regard to the steep slope of the land, but nonetheless, I think we need to make a judgment in terms of the application itself and the extent to which we judge there is a loss of neighbours' amenity. And to take up the point with regard to screening, there is currently no screening.
Thank you. Right. Right, we need to move to recommendation that subject to conditions permission be granted, and again, it's the old green light for yes, red light for no, and yellow for abstain. Come on. Do we have a result?
So that's 13 in favour and 2 against.
No, 2 abstain.
Sorry,
2
2
abstain.
abstentions.
Right.
So that is carried.
Okay, I know we had a long night. I just wanted to make a small personal statement at the end of this meeting. Since the next meeting of the planning committee has been brought forward from the 10th to the 3rd of April, I'm afraid that I'm away that week in Scotland, and if I will not be in attendance at that meeting, and the chair will pass that meeting to Councillor Rivers. But since that in fact brings to the end of the meeting for you, it means that my position as chair will then finish as of this committee. And I would like to record my appreciation of all the contribution both from officers and from members in what has been a very interesting year. And so be it. So everybody.